Today I'm going to show you how to install Windows 10 on any computer, whether that be a laptop or a desktop, and I'll walk you through each step of the process in detail. This will be useful if you've just built a custom desktop PC, are upgrading to an SSD in your laptop, or even if you're just looking to speed up your computer with a fresh install of Windows. I'll also be walking you through some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over time that will help make the install process much smoother. This tutorial will be split into two separate parts. The first will walk you through preparing everything needed to install Windows and the install itself, while the second part will be a walkthrough of the post-install steps and what to do once you have Windows installed to get everything up and running smoothly. So enjoy the video and stay tuned for part 2 in the coming weeks. So for this process, we're going to need only a few things. First is a 16 gig USB drive. I've just got this Toshiba one that I've had for years. It doesn't have to be anything special. This one is 16 gig, but you can go as low as about 8 gig or so, and that should be just fine. But yeah, you just need something 8 gig or higher, which is enough to hold the Windows installation media, and we'll be installing all that onto the USB in just a moment. So apart from that, you'll just need the computer you're going to be installing on. You'll need an internet connection and another computer, either the current one you're already using or a different desktop if it's a clean install, to be able to set up this USB to work properly. So first things first, we're going to plug this USB into our computer, and then we'll be able to get started and then get set up on the desktop, and I'll walk you through the process of how to get this set up. So now we're over here on the desktop. As you can see, I've got my Windows computer here. This just has a version of Windows 10 on it, fully up to date. So basically, it's a pretty simple process. I'll just open my File Explorer and drag that across so you can see we've got our 16 gig USB drive here. So that's the drive I've just plugged into my computer, and we're going to be installing our Windows 10 installation media on that. So first step of the process is we're going to have to download a piece of software that will help us install the media required to install Windows 10 on this USB drive. So I've just got a link here. I'll put this in the top of the description so you can follow it. So this will take us to the Microsoft website. And here we have, create Windows 10 installation media. So they've made it pretty easy in the past, and for other Linux distributions, you normally have to use other software, download the ISO file yourself, and then go from there. But here they've just got a tool that will download the ISO file and install it on the USB for you, and then it'll be ready to go. So we're just going to download this tool right here and wait for it to download. Now this is going to be a small download, so this isn't the actual Windows 10 install file itself, but this is just the tool that will help us download. So let's grab that. We'll open that, and here it is. So it'll just start off with getting things ready, and then we'll be able to jump into setting up this USB for the install. So don't worry if this is taking a moment. There we go. You can see, just jumped into the terms and conditions. Now, obviously, you want to read through these, as everyone does with all terms and conditions. But after you do that, just click accept, and then we'll jump into the next step. All right, here we go. So as you can see, new screen's popped up. So there's two options here. So if you're just on a laptop or a desktop, and say this can be used if you're on Windows 7 and you want to upgrade to Windows 10, which most people have done by now. But if that's still the case, that's what this PC now option can be used for. However, what we're doing is we're installing on another PC. So we're going to create an installation media. So that's the first option you want to check. And so it'll recommend some options for your PC. So we'll just double check these right. English United States, yep, that's right. Windows 10, that's what we want to install. And then 64-bit, yeah. So you always want 64-bit as your architecture. So we're just going to continue. So the media type, here's the next step of the process. So as I talked about before, normally you would have to download the ISO file and then install that yourself using another program like Etcher or Rufus. But in this case, we're just going to go the easy step. Instead of downloading the ISO file, we're just going to install it straight onto the USB flash drive just to eliminate any extra hassle. And as you can see here, as I mentioned before, it needs to be at least 8 gigabytes, which we're all sorted with. So I want to go next, the USB flash drive, and here you go. So generally, it's only going to pop up the flash drives that it knows or it thinks you want to use. So it's not really going to try and use 1 terabyte hard drive or even external hard drives, but be sure to double check this is the right drive because any data on this flash drive will be erased. So let's just double check. We'll open up File Explorer. Yep, so our F drive is this 16 gig USB and it's empty. So we're good to go. And we're going to select this and continue. So another loading screen here, so just wait for that to finish. And here we go. So this is the step that will take a while and you're going to have to be patient here. So Windows will download. It is about 3 or 4 gigabytes, the file itself. So it might take a while depending on your internet connection. But you'll just have to wait for this to finish. So to go through the first stage of the process, which is this first progress meter, which is downloading Windows. And then the second status meter will be, which will pop up after this, is going to be installing it on the USB flash drive ready for installation on your computer. So we'll just let this go for a while and then I'll be back once it's done. After Windows 10 has been downloaded and installed on a USB flash drive, this is the final window that you should see. And this is just telling you that everything worked successfully and you're ready to install Windows 10 on your computer. So the next step is to take that USB drive out and put it in the computer you're wanting to install Windows 10 on. So that's going to be our next step. So I'll move over to the camera for recording the screen, and then I'll show you the steps to do once we're on our computer and doing our clean install. So before we get on to installing Windows 10 on this computer, the next step is to ensure we are only installing on the drive we want to install on. So in this case, that'll be our 120 gig SSD. And now I do have other drives in this computer. And if you do as well, you're going to want to be careful to make sure you install it on the right drive. Make sure you're not erasing data that you don't want to erase. So first step, we'll make sure our computer's turned off, and then we'll take off the side panel and we'll get in there and unplug the other drives that we don't want. So now that we have the side panel off, here's a look at the drives I have installed on this computer. So we've got a 1 terabyte hard drive right here. We have and then we have 2 SSDs installed here. So we've got one 250 gig SSD down the bottom and a 120 gig SSD up the top. So this top one is the only one we're going to be installing Windows on today. So just as a safety precaution, I recommend doing this if you can at all possible. If you aren't able to do this, if you're on a laptop or a system that you can't access, this is okay, but this is just a safety measure that makes sure you're not going to delete any data. But I'll show you how to avoid formatting the wrong drive later on. But first step, we'll turn these all off. So we're on the back side of the computer here. And on the back side of the computer here, we have access to the cables for our drives. So here it's a bit messy, but it's pretty straightforward what we need to do. So this top one up here is the only drive we want to keep connected, so we'll leave that alone. The other two, the main cable we need to unplug is this SATA data cable. So make sure you push down this clip and unplug it. We can leave the power plugged in for now, as that's fine to leave installed because this is the only thing that's talking to the computer, and that will show up if we go to install Windows. I'm also going to unplug this other SATA cable, as you can see down here, for our computer for the hard drive. So now we only have this top SSD installed. That's the one we're going to be installing Windows on. So I'm just going to leave this side panel like this for now until we're done with the installation. But that's all we need to do to prepare our computer for installing Windows. And of course, here's our USB that we just set up before. We're going to need to plug this into the top of our computer to make sure we can get everything up and going. So get that plugged in, get all the cables hooked up to the back of your computer, and then we'll get on to installing Windows. So here we are set up recording the screen for our computer. So what you'll need to do, this is an important step. When you boot into your computer, you're going to have to find out what the BIOS key is. Now this changes based on what your computer is and what computer model it is. So for some computers it's F12, some it's escape, and some it's delete. In this instance, I believe it is the delete key that will enter into our BIOS, and there we can select which drive we want to boot from, and we're going to choose the USB. So I'm going to do that now for mine. We're going to turn on the computer and try to get it to boot. So as you can see, that got us into the BIOS here, and this is what the MSI BIOS for my motherboard looks like. Yours will probably look different to this depending on the make of your computer or your laptop, but this is what my specific one looks like. So the most important step is we're going to have to go to boot over here. We're going to change our boot option 1 to, want it to be our UEFI USB key, and that's a Toshiba drive that we've got right here. I'm going to select that, and that's all we need to do, and then we can save and exit. Save and exit, and continue with our Windows install. So now that those settings are set, we'll let it reboot, and it should boot into our Windows installer, and then we can go through all the required steps. So your computer might do something a bit different. It'll take its time, but eventually it should get to the Windows installer and boot up into that USB. Ignore those artifacts on the bottom of the screen. Don't worry about those. That's just something to do with the graphics driver not being set up properly, but we don't need to worry about that for now because it's just to get Windows installed on our SSD, and then we'll set up the rest later once we are properly into Windows. There you go, got your Windows logo, so that's a good sign. So this is the first screen that you'll see once we boot into Windows. There's a few settings that you will have to change based on where you are. So language to install, English, United States. So basically if you speak English, just choose this option. Now this time and currency format, that's going to be a bit different depending on where you're located. So at the moment, I'm located in Australia, so I'm going to look for English Australia. As you can see, there's a bunch of different countries here, so just choose whichever one is yours, and that will change what type of keyboard Windows thinks you're using, and what money format you're using. And then for the keyboard input format, so this is based on what currency you use, and so different keyboards are going to have different characters for the currency, for the dollar or whatever currency format you use. So for me, we use the $ symbol, and that's the same as the US, so I'll click that. And okay, so here's our first window. So we want to click install now. So this won't start installing yet, but it'll start going through the steps of installation, and it will start getting things set up. Okay, so here's our first step. So activate Windows. Now, you might be a bit worried. If you don't have a Windows key yet, you might be a bit daunted. But for now, we don't have to worry about this. I will link some sites where you can get cheaper Windows keys that are still totally fine to use and work fine. You can also run without Windows activated. You just won't be able to change the wallpaper, and there's a few other limitations. There'll be a watermark in the bottom corner, or you can just buy a normal Windows key. It's up to you. But for now, we can skip this step, and we'll still be able to do the installation perfectly fine. So in all installations, I recommend just saying I don't have a product key, and then we can go forward from there. So the next step is we're going to choose what version of Windows we want. So this will depend on what license you have. For us, right now, we're going to choose Windows 10 Home. If you've got a Windows 10 Pro license or an education license, choose those, but just choose Windows 10 Home for now. That's perfectly fine. And here's terms we have to agree to in order to go forward. So you can read through all these if you want, but we're just going to accept the terms and conditions here. All right, and here's an important step of the process, which I'll just make sure it's nice and clear. Zoom in. So here we can either upgrade our Windows version. So this is if you're coming from Windows 7 and you want to upgrade. We're not doing that. This is only for a custom install, this tutorial, as we're installing on a blank drive and a blank computer. So we're going to want to install custom install Windows only. And here we go. All right, so this is where it comes in handy having unplugged all our other drives. Now, if we hadn't, we would have seen our 240 gig SSD here as well, and our 1 terabyte hard drive. And there's a chance, if you're not careful, that you can accidentally erase those other drives which have important data on them. But in this instance, we've already made sure we're not going to erase that data. So this is just our 120 gig SSD. Now, as you can see, drive 0, these are both part of the same drive, and I know this drive has nothing on it. This partition is just because I previously formatted it, and it's just for the system, but we can delete this for now because once you select which drive to install on, Windows will sort that out all for you. So we're going to choose drive 0 on our allocated space, and all we need to do is click new, apply, okay. That'll create partitions for us, and then we're going to click next. And now we have to wait again. So now Windows is going to go through all the steps it needs. It's going to copy all the files from that USB drive and start installing those onto the SSD so we can start running Windows. So you'll just have to wait for these steps to complete. If you're using an SSD for the installation, this will go a bit quicker, and it also depends on the speed of your USB. If you're using a hard drive for the installation, things will go a bit slower, but it won't be too slow. So I'll let this run, and then we'll come back once the install has finished. Okay, so now that that's finished installing, we can go through the steps it takes to get the rest of Windows installed. So this is the configuration process, and we'll have to just go through a few menus and get everything set up. All right, so first one, you have to choose your country. So this will change based on where you are. For me, I'm in Australia, but if you're in America, choose the United States. If you're somewhere else, choose that. And we'll move on. Keyboard layout. For me, it's US. As I said before, no, we don't want to add a second layout. Generally, you don't need to do this. Now it's just going to do a bit more setup. So Windows is just rebooted, and that's all part of the process. Don't get worried. It will reboot and do its thing, and then we'll get into the next step of the installation process. Here we go, back into the installer. There you go. Now let's see what's new from Windows. As you'll find, there's a lot of phrases of Windows trying to be quirky and fun during the installer. And as you might have noticed, this window is actually a lot smaller than our monitor. So that's just because we don't have any graphics drivers installed yet, but once we get into Windows, that will sort itself out. So here's an important step that I will give a warning about. So the default way to do this is to just put in your Microsoft account or create an account and then set it up that way. And then everything on the computer will be linked to that Microsoft account. However, from my experience, I would strongly recommend against this and instead aim to go for an offline account. Now the way to do this is a bit convoluted, and Microsoft has tried their hardest to stop you from doing this, but I'll show you a good trick to be able to do this. So first step is, if you have a desktop and it's plugged into Ethernet, which mine is, which is why we didn't get any Wi-Fi setup screen, I'm just going to have to go and unplug the Ethernet cable. If you have got to this stage so far, you can either, and it's already prompted you to install Wi-Fi. If you haven't done so yet, just say you don't have any internet at the moment, and then we can set that up later. If you have already done that, you're going to want to turn the computer off at this stage and then turn it back on. And then when you get to then it'll restart this stage of the process. And when you get to the Wi-Fi step, don't connect to Wi-Fi or unplug your Wi-Fi card. And we need to do the next step, not connected to internet. I'm going to go unplug my Ethernet cable right now. All right, now my Ethernet cable is unplugged. We can just go back to the previous step, and now it's giving us a different screen, a different option, because it notices, oh wait, we don't have internet. So I can't use a Microsoft account. So I'm gonna just call this one a technical. That's who's gonna use this PC. And we're gonna go next. As you'll see, it hasn't at any point prompted me to set up my Microsoft account now that we're not connected to the internet. So this is a good workaround, and this saves you a lot of hassle down the road dealing with Windows 10 rubbish relating to your Microsoft account and installing apps for you, and yeah, a lot of hassle. So you can create a password here if you want. I'm not going to create that for the purposes of this video, but we're just going to click next. I would recommend creating a password, however. All right, and here's a few important steps. So for this, I would just you might want to go through these and look at them individually. All these are basically the ways Windows collects data for you. Some are helpful, some may improve apps in some ways, but I generally just go through and disable all these. And you can always re-enable these if they cause issues for any software used down the road, but we're just going to disable all those and click accept. Device activity history, I've never really found useful in the timeline, so I'm just going to say no to this. You can use that if you want, it's up to you. Cortana, definitely not. Cortana is basically useless on Windows. I would not recommend using it. It is an annoyance more than anything, so we're just going to say not now. And then Windows is going to go through its next stage of the process, and it's going to get things set up for you. Get some colors. If we zoom out, you can see the whole monitor. So this will take a bit of time, as the screen says, so be patient and just let it run. Don't get worried that it's not working. As long as this color is changing, going good, and Windows will do its thing and will pop up with a prompt once it's ready to go for the next step. And here we go. So we are now into Windows. As you can see, we are up and running. So at this stage, before I do anything, I'm gonna jump into the screen recording software so we can get a better view of the screen, and then I'll hook the internet back up and get everything set up for you. So I'll see you in the next clip, and I'll show you how to do everything. So the next step, just hook your internet back up or connect to Wi-Fi, and then we can move on with the post-installation stage of the process. But this stage, you've got Windows installed on your SSD, and now we just have to get everything set up so it runs nice and smoothly on your hardware.